What's going on? This is Darian, and today I'm going to be doing a reaction video on something that has come up. It's starting to, resurface again just within talks within the community. I've seen Green Beret Chronicles even have like a little story on it talking about black people can't swim.
The excuse of growing up in inner cities where pools are not an option is no longer a fucking valid excuse. If you grew up in the inner cities and there's basketball courts and all that shit around and you choose to go there, that is a choice that you're making instead of going to a YMCA and learning this basic skills.
And all this other stuff. And some of the actual comments were absolutely hilarious on other posts I've seen. I keep seeing it on Instagram about black guys in boot camp when it comes to swim calls and all this other stuff. So
you may not realize this, but you're an African American.
I was like, you know what? I've been an aviation rescue swimmer for the better part of 20 years in the military. We have to be decent swimmers. You actually have to be a pretty strong swimmer to do that job. And I used to get pulled over all the time. Not pulled over, but pulled aside when I was on the ship or anywhere else and saying, hey man, you're a rescue swimmer? You can swim? And I was like, yeah, I can.
You may not realize this, but you're an African American.
Why does everybody think we can't swim? Now, I do know what I think, but this video right here is on YouTube called Swimming While Black. So I want to go ahead and watch this video with you guys and see if what they're thinking is what I thought. And I'm thinking black people can swim just the same. There is a muscle mass density part to it, but it's cultural. I think it has to do with hair. I think it has to do with proximity to the water. Everyone has proximity to a pool, so I don't even want to hear that. But I grew up in San Diego, and people used that as an excuse why I could swim. I never got in that damn water until I was in the military. So, yeah, either way, let's watch the video.
You've probably heard the stereotype.
Black people
just can't swim.
Nope.
For generations, this has been an all too familiar tale within the black community. But here's something you may not know. Black children are drowning at 3 times the rate of white children. And years of racial segregation.
All right, I didn't expect him to start, it sounds like there's like a little cute white girl who's narrating this. And she just started off by just saying black children are drowning. And I'm like, dang, like for real? So, all right. Oh, I didn't expect that.
Nope.
So that definitely seemed comedic, even though I know it's not a comedy thing. There's nothing funny about kids drowning, although it's the truth. It's a reality we live with, but black kids drowning at 3 times the rate? Good night. Let's continue.
And in America's pools may be to blame. In the United States, 64% of black children can't swim.
That's higher than I thought. This video is 4 years old. I'm not going to be stopping it too often, but 64%, that's a grip. It's obviously more than half.
My son, Genesis Holmes, was only 13 years old. He wanted to swim with his friends.
In May 2014, police reported to a scene near a local high school in the small town of Hollywood, South Carolina. An unidentified teen was found floating in a pond off Highway 162. Dive and rescue teams scoured the area and recovered the body of Genesis Holmes.
Genesis didn't make it back out because Genesis didn't know how to swim. All our life, most of us, honestly, we was told to stay from the water. It's like a family tradition that they had from generation to the next generation. So I taught my children to stay away from water. Genesis had so much plans. He had great plans for his life.
All right, pausing it right there. That mother literally said exactly what I'm talking about. It's generational, it's cultural. Stay away from the water. If I can't swim, I'm probably not going to naturally bring my kid to a pool or a beach unless there's lifeguards. And even still, if there's lifeguards, I'm going to have, that fudge factor in the back of my head, like, let's just not risk it.
Nope.
Let's do sports, which swimming is a sport, but let's do ground sports. Let's do sports that people who breathe air do, not water. And this is unfortunate what happened to her son Genesis. That's a really cool name, by the way, but 13 years old. I have 4 children. 3 of them are teenagers, and then I have a 9-year-old. All of them can swim. And it's not because I'm a great guy. I took them to the pool when they were very young and just threw them in the pool and just made them figure it out. Now, they were comfortable in the water first, and then they eventually became swimmers. So let's continue.
Genesis's death is reflective of a darker trend of accidental drownings across the country. In the U.S., more than 10 people die from drowning each day. 1 in 5 of those deaths are children between the ages of 1 and 14. And most of those deaths are disproportionately Black.
Bruh.
So why is this happening? And why are Black children drowning at such high rates? We tapped University of Montana history professor Jeff Wiltsey.
Nothing against it, but Jeff is another white dude. Now, unless he's just like sitting back observing Black kids drown, I'm really curious what he's about to say. I don't care who reports on it. I just think it's like men telling women issues or something like that. It's like, how about women? How about you guys tell your own damn issues? Now, if this dude cares, if Jeff Wiltsey cares more than Black people to do this research, then hats off to him. I'll listen to anybody who's done some research. I just think it already is starting off like, damn.
To talk about racism and the social history that shaped America's first public pools.
The very first public pools were located exclusively in large northeastern cities, Philadelphia, Boston, New York. They were all in poor neighborhoods, what we call urban slums.
For the poor children of New York, $1 million swimming pool, a luxury summer resort for the kids of the sweltering tenements and slums on East Side.
Where poor and working class immigrants, native-born African Americans lived, and that's the population that they were intended to serve. Sort of dirty working class boys and young men would plunge into the pool and then clean themselves in the water of the pool. It was essentially served as a large bathtub.
What? That's right. The first public pools were not only racially inclusive, but they served as bathhouses for the poor, who often swam nude. For this reason, public pools originally prohibited men and women from swimming together. But after World War I, that all changed. After the war, Americans were earning more and working less. To give you a sense, the average work week went from 59 hours before the war to 51 hours after the war. This gave Americans a lot more time to enjoy leisure activities like swimming, and eventually opened the door for new...
Damn, you see them kids jumping off of that shit? There's an accident waiting to happen. Guarantee somebody broke their neck at that pool within like the week. This said 10 kids drowned a day? Is that what it said at the beginning of the video? That's crazy. Now, right here during these time frames in the early 1900s, my grandparents were alive, but none of my parents were alive. So I'm kind of curious to see where this goes when it comes to that. And it sucks that that's how the, pools even started. But at what point are you going to just say, hey, let's break the stereotype, start taking your kids to the pool right now? Like today, right now. My son, he wants to be a team guy. And I was like, dude, you definitely have to swim. I mean, any special operations, you're going to swim, especially if you're in the Navy. We're known for being maritime, so you're going to swim. But, hey, let's continue.
Mixed gender pools.
And it's the point at which a city gender integrates, allows males and females to use the same pool at the same time that cities and white swimmers impose racial segregation. In a nutshell, the basic reason was, white public officials and white swimmers would not allow Black men to interact with white women at such an intimate public space.
Damn.
Racial discrimination became normalized and institutionalized across the country. From the north to the south, white-only pools became hallmarks for racial exclusion, and they would stay that way until the 60s.
This sucks.
Southern cities used Jim Crow laws to enforce segregation in pools and other public spaces.
Okay, so it said 1960, now it's in 1958. So my dad was born in 56, my mother was born in 61. So this is unfortunate, but I've never actually even had to experience, I've experienced racism for sure, even being black, but nothing to the point where it was lawful. It was just stereotypes, jokes, people who just go somewhere else. They got punched straight in the mouth. But I've never had to experience not being able to go to a black or white only place like this. So that's why I look at it ignorantly. And I'm 40 years old, for crying out loud. I'm not exactly young, but I'm not old. And I grew up swimming. I'll probably get into that later on in this video if they hit on it. And I saw no problem with swimming.
Nope.
But I never knew this history of why most black people cannot swim. 64%. I've seen jokes that says that black people who can't swim are inept because it's a basic survival skill. Now, of course, there's comedy in it, but at the same time, it's like, well, you don't do anything. You can't be good at anything if you don't learn it. And you won't learn anything if you don't practice it. So.
While northern cities used intimidation and violence to keep blacks out. All the while, local chapters of the NAACP worked to file lawsuits against neighborhood pools and beaches that denied blacks access. Pools went from being places for leisure to racial battlegrounds, and it would take 2 protests in Florida to change that.
What are you prepared to do now, Dr. King? Well, we will stand here and protest what we feel is a blatant injustice.
On June 11th, 1964, police arrested Dr. Martin Luther King and more than a dozen religious leaders after they staged a protest against racial segregation at the Monson Motor Lodge in St. Augustine, Florida. His arrest inspired others to act. Less than a week later, 16 rabbis joined a group of black and white protesters at the same hotel. As the rabbis prayed on the property, protesters jumped into a white-only pool to stage a swim-in. What happened next sent shockwaves across the country.
What the hell is that?
Motor Lodge hotel owner James Brooke pouring acid into the pool to get protesters out.
That's freaking foul.
Sparked enough outrage to gain the attention of then President Lyndon B. Johnson.
F this dude right here. Lyndon B. Johnson can, well, he's dead already, but I hate knowing about him and his freaking war on poverty and all this other junk. I can't stand him. But let me go ahead and stop there. These are the 1950s, 60s, if I'm not mistaken, obviously based on presidents. But I want to share with you something, being that I was a Navy rescue swimmer. This is something I think was very interesting. I found this on a Facebook group like Black Heroes or Black Activism and all this stuff, right? Black. But here it is. In 1942, I'm putting this up on the screen if you can't see it. U.S. Navy messman. A messman is a cook. Now, if you look at old movies like Pearl Harbor and you see Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character, he was like, I think he was like a cook before he became a diver, and they just called him Cookie, right? And there were certain jobs that other people did in the military based on gender and based on race. And I never had to experience that personally, but I do know it existed within our history, so I'm not going to play dumb like I showed up and everything was great. That's not true. But U.S. Navy messman, so a cook, Charles Jackson French, successfully swam through the night for 6 to 8 hours, pulling a raft of 15 wounded soldiers with a rope around his waist in shark-infested waters. He was the first black swimmer to receive the Navy Medal of Heroism in 1943. And this right here is probably an actual picture of this man. It could very well be him, and then there's obviously a drawing depiction of all these white people in a raft with shark fins, the dorsal fins, and a black guy swimming. It definitely kind of looks like some slave level shit at the same time, even though I know it's not. It was him acting in the capacity of a rescue swimmer. But imagine just seeing the image and saying, hey, black guy, why don't you get out there and swim us superior whites around in this, since there are sharks out there. Somebody can look at it that way, but that's not how the story reads.
Nope.
So it was an act of heroism. But this is in 1943. This is before some of that, but it was also during some of this as well. So let's continue.
Some activists even say it influenced Johnson to sign the Civil Rights Act less than a month later.
All men are entitled to the blessings of liberty, yet millions are being deprived of those blessings, not because of their own failures, but because of the color of their skin.
The bill outlawed segregation based on race, color, religion, or sex, a notion that until that point was common practice throughout most of the country. And while several places across the U.S. had already begun desegregating public spaces, by the time the Civil Rights Act was passed, it was too late. After World War II, white Americans left cities for the suburbs in pursuit of the highly commercialized American dream. You know the whole car, white picket fence, home in the suburbs. Now you might be thinking, what does white flight have to do with black people swimming?
Exactly.
Well, the answer is a lot. Once white Americans left for the suburbs, cities throughout the country stopped investing in the upkeep of their public pools. So when blacks and other minorities finally regained access after the Civil Rights Act, most of them had already closed.
Tens of thousands
Interesting.
of private club pools developed in suburban communities, and what that enables suburban communities to do, members to do, is to control who has access to those pools and who they determine would not have access to those pools and the swim lessons that occurred at those pools.
Today, gentrification is the driving force behind modern-day pool segregation. So in other words, it isn't so much your race that determines your likelihood of being able to swim, but your class.
Okay, so there's a class system here, and obviously any sport or anything that people want to get good at, if you're never invited to train or learn based on those racial tensions or sexism, then yes, you will by default never really get the chance or the opportunity. Now, for the coastal black people, this is definitely not an excuse to me.
Nope.
Now, it still may be. There still may have been white beaches and private beaches and stuff like that. But when you can get in the ocean and swim, you don't need the pool. Don't go to the pool. Go to the ocean. If that's a thing back then. Like I said, I was born in 1983, so I've seen 1979 so far. Now, obviously, even when I was born that year, I wasn't swimming. But by the time I was about 3-4 years old, I started taking swim lessons and going to pools. So this is back in the mid 80s. That's when I started swimming, and I never sensed any sort of racial stuff stating I could not be there. But either way, let's continue. And I'm not going to play this whole video out, but I want to hit some points in the first place. But I was not aware that 64% of us cannot swim.
Example, affluent suburban communities are far more likely to have access to pools than their city counterparts. Look at the numbers, and you can see why. There are more than 10 million residential pools compared to the 300,000 public pools across the country. On top of that, public pools are disappearing. Since 2009, more than 1,800 public pools have closed across the country.
Now, I've definitely been alive since this. I've been in the military, for crying out loud, at least 8 years during this point. Now, I can definitely see that because I also grew up in Southern California where skateboarding was very, very big. And I can tell you right now, there's been a lot of empty pools that people turned into skating, like skate pools. They would use it for the bowl and all the different curvatures and stuff inside of it, and it was already smoothed out. And I got that, but I never once considered these pools being empty for this purpose as I did for the fact that it turned into a skate pool or a skate park. And yeah, that's interesting. That is very interesting to me. Now, it doesn't mean that black people, when we start our own dang radio networks, when we started our own like BET, Black Entertainment Television, there's nothing stopping black people from swimming if it was something that we as a group gave a crap about more. This isn't a bash on black people. It just means like, hey, look, if you want to learn something, go out and learn it.
Some rural towns like Hollywood, South Carolina, where Genesis Holmes lived, never even opened one.
Genesis cried out for help because he didn't know how to swim. If me and my husband had gave him swim lesson.
I'm also going to stop right here. I have to. His mom already knew he couldn't swim, but she still let him go and swim. I think there's a little bit of neglect on that part. There is a point where the boy was 13 years old. So, like, I was a freshman in high school when I was 13. I graduated when I was 17. So, I also say there is some liberty. Oh, I'm going to go to my friend's house and I'm going to go hang out. And, you know, we might swim and you might not. Do you know how to swim? Yeah. And then you drown and you find out you don't. I don't know. But if my kid couldn't do something very well, I would have a lot more cautiousness on my decision to let them go out and do that. Not that they would never learn. It just means like, hey, what is the danger level of this? Like, could it be fatal? Even though it seems very innocent in nature, swimming is probably one of the most dangerous things you can do because we are obviously not acclimated to breathe water. So, yeah.
Genesis would have made it out.
After Genesis's death, Jennifer Holmes couldn't stop thinking about the what ifs. What if she had learned how to swim? What if Genesis had swim lessons? That's when she came up with an idea.
Being that I lost
Say it.
our baby, I had to do something to where that I could let others know how important water safety is, that what we were taught is not good for us, and why it's important to learn how to swim to help reduce drowning out in the rural area.
And she didn't stop there. Holmes became a lifeguard and raised more than $15,000 for the Genesis Project to bring swimming lessons to Black children in her small town. It wouldn't take long before the rest of the community noticed.
That is amazing. I absolutely applaud this woman. She became a lifeguard to not only know what it is to swim, but have to save someone else. So you have to be a decent swimmer in order to do that. And then, yes, it focused on Black children swimming because of the huge dynamic. However, it should, I don't know if it was, I'm just saying, it should be open to all individuals. But the focus is on Black children because it is culturally something. Now, Black people do tend to actually live in the lower and middle class areas. We do have some extremely poor people, but we tend to not actually live in those areas. So the class system part to me is gone. It is still now just culturally ingrained not to swim. At least that's just my opinion, and I'm going to continue. But hats off to this lady. I actually really, really appreciate this.
After hearing about Genesis, the Charleston County Parks Foundation gave Holmes $3 million towards opening the town's first public pool, the Genesis Pool.
We should
The
rejoice
beginning.
this day that many lives will learn how to swim. We honor Genesis Holmes, and we honor all that went this tragic way. We don't care where you're from. You're welcome.
Outstanding. They don't care where you're from, you're all welcome. Over here on the left, you see a white girl who's probably the actual lifeguard right now and stuff like that. And it's very tragic what happened to her son Genesis, but it takes sometimes a tragedy to put focus where it needs to. And like I said, this mother, she lost her child to something that should have been a fun activity. And she did something about it. She went out and probably learned how to swim herself because she said she didn't, but she became a lifeguard, so she had to learn. And then she decided to not only swim for herself, but be able to swim for others who could not. And I think that is awesome.
To learn about water safety. Thank you. When Genesis was about 5-6 years old, he told me about an amazing vision that he had, that he was sitting in a palm of a man's hand, and it was huge. Mom, I'm gonna do big things. Yeah. It's like, Genesis, come on, you was 5-6 years old, big things. He said, yes, Mom, you should have saw his hands. His hand was so amazing. I was sitting in the clouds. And when they told me that Genesis and his friends were swimming, and Genesis took me out, my life changed. Our life changed. And all I can remember is that Genesis said, Mom, I'm going to help many people. And so many people are going to know my name.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and end that part there. I think I watched the entire video already. But, like, let me know. What do you guys think? A lot of people have been leaving some comments, whether it be on Instagram, YouTube, some positive, some negative, some neutral, of course. But the negative comments are always dumb. And it's not that they're negative and I'm against negativity. It's not that at all. It's because it's very ignorant. And I think that's my point. And I can even be ignorant to my own race of people. Like I said, I grew up being able to go to a pool without any segregation. So I never felt that. My parents did allow me to go to the swimming pool. As a matter of fact, both my mom and dad never took me to the pool. My aunts did with my cousins. And we went and we learned how to play in the shallow end and dive for those little weighted rings and sticks, and we got very comfortable in the water in the first place. And once that happened, we then decided, how do I get from A to B more efficiently, which is where the swimming lessons came into play. And that was just a part of my childhood. I didn't notice that black people couldn't swim because everywhere I went to a pool there, and I didn't live in full urban environments, but there was a mix of Latin Americans, whites, blacks, and Asians, and we were all in the pool. And sometimes I was landlocked. I was not always near a beach. And I never knew that black people couldn't swim until I went to boot camp. That is when I was just as shocked as other people. I was like, what? What? Y'all dudes can't swim? Everybody in my division that was black failed their first swim test, the third class swimmer test, except for me. I'm not saying that to be boastful, to brag about it. It was just something that I thought was very shocking. I was the only one who passed. And then I was there to do a second class swim test when they were all remediating for their third class swim test. I had to do a second class swim test to be an air crewman in the first place, or to qualify to continue on the Navy training to go through aircrew school, which I passed, obviously. And then going through aviation rescue swimmer school made me a first class swimmer, which is where I was not only able to save my own life, but that of another person as well. And throughout the years, I've been swimming off and on every year in the capacity of my job. As a matter of fact, I went out and broke, 800 meters like a few weeks ago. I went to my local pool that is in my gym, and I decided to just swim. And of course, there were some people looking at me like, I wonder if this dude could swim. And I'm passing other people up in the lanes, doing the combat side stroke, the freestyle, and the breaststroke. Just doing it, and people were like, after a while, they looked at me, and the lifeguard, they moved away. Like, oh, okay, well, I don't have to rescue this dude, so I'm gonna move back to where all the kids are. So I guess the stigma is true that black people can't swim. You heard it here. I don't know where they did all their research at, but 64% is a very, very large number. And it's not that black people can't swim by choice, because we obviously choose not to, or I'm sorry, that we can't swim genetically. It is a choice thing. That's why we also don't swim. Today, like I said, I understand what happened to Genesis. I understand what happened to all of this stuff. It is still disproportionately that a lot of black people can't swim. Hopefully this video has somebody take heed and actually get their kid to a pool and not just a basketball court or a football field. Take them to a pool. And there are some black Olympians that are winning medals as well. And I think that's awesome that we're breaking down the stereotype that we cannot do something. Never let anybody tell you that you can't do something regardless of your race, gender, sex, religious preference, whatever. If you can physically do it and it is able for you to do, go ahead, knock yourself out. This is my quick video for the day. Well, it's not that quick, but it's my video for the day, and I'm out. Peace.